On this episode, we interview author TR Fischer. It's a fantastic story, and I hope you enjoy the interview. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm excited to interview you and kind of hear your story and hear how you got to where you are. And it sounds like you do a lot of exciting things. And so I really like to just start out in the beginning, where it all started, and to kind of hear your journey. So why don't you give us a little bit of a preview of your life? Like, give us the journey that has brought you to here. So where does it all start?
Well, it starts in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay.
So I was born in Boulder, and I lived there. We lived there until I was 13, and I am from a huge family by today's standards. I have 9 sisters.
Wow. So one of 10.
Right.
Which is, I think that's huge by any standards.
It is.
Right? Maybe unless you live in like Salt Lake City or Utah or someplace.
Especially if you're calculating estrogen levels. Then
I feel like when I read that on your bio, I was thinking, I bet your dad every time was thinking, we'll just try one more time for a boy.
Yeah, and the last one is Roberta, because they never got Robert. So it's Roberta Lee. Sorry, Roberta, there goes your privacy.
Oh, man. So why so many kids? What do you think? Did your parents ever say that, like, why they?
I think
a little bit of the faith.
Yeah.
Said, hey, like,
we were a Catholic family. Yeah.
Okay.
And for me it was normal, because that's a lot of my friends were. One of my best friend had 13 kids in her family.
Oh, wow.
So
so just normal.
It was normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of crazy.
Yeah. What was that like as far as? Both your parents kind of had to work then to feed everybody, and
yeah, I think my dad was a firefighter, and he worked maybe in part to get away 3 days a week.
Yeah.
I don't know. Although we were always glad when Dad was gone too, because he was the authoritarian.
Right. So it's like, Dad's gone. Like,
right.
let's
Dad's
just
gone. We can relax. So, and then my mom, she worked nights as a nurse, so she was basically comatose for a lot of life, because you work nights and then you come home and you get the kids off to school, and then you get a couple hours of sleep, right? And then they come home and the sleep's over.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm sure once you had your own kids, you really started to appreciate like what your parents did to.
When I was in labor.
You're like,
with
wow.
my first kid, I was like, wow, 10 times, Mom. Okay, my hat is now officially off to my mom for on a whole different level.
Yeah. So where do you rank in that?
Well, I'm number 1, but I'm actually the 9th. Oh,
Okay.
just kidding. No, I'm I'm the 9th of 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I have 8 sisters in front of me and 1 tag along.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how close are you with those guys?
We're really, you mean age-wise?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my mom, from my oldest down to the youngest, it is 11 and a half years. Just shy of 11 and a half years, yeah.
So they were just cranking. It's like,
Yep.
This machine's going. We might as well just keep it going.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I can't, testify to any of that, because I was so late in the game that I always say, Mom, I should have been breached, because then I could have said, and it's the bottom of the 9th, and Teresa's here. But it didn't work.
Oh, that's awesome. What was that like as far as, you kind of had built-in friends then at that point?
Yeah, it really was a clan kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And you were, like, at least for me, my experience, it's different for all of us because of where we are in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I was a Cordell first and myself second. And in some ways that was good, and in some ways it really sucked. So it just it really depended on the situation. I'm really a prankster, and so the downside for me was that everybody knew who I was already going in. Every teacher knew, oh, it's a Cordell. And even if someone didn't know me by my name, we all looked a lot alike. And so I couldn't go anywhere in town and not have someone go, hey, are you a Cordell? And so it was, I was like, I can't, everything I do is going to be seen and reported back to my dad. So.
Yeah. So you kind of had to mind your P's and Q's. You weren't that rebellious of a child?
I was actually pretty rebellious. I was a careful rebel.
Okay.
So I did everything I could that was kind of under the radar. And I had a certain line of, I never did anything that was like criminal. But I pushed the line.
Okay. Here's criminal. Here's me.
Yeah. Most of it, though, was motivated not by evil intentions, but just I have this insatiable curiosity and sense of adventure. And so it was really all about the adrenaline fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like what? Like what?
Like when I was little, swinging from trees, and we would play these huge games. We lived a block away from this old elementary school in Boulder called Whittier. And so they had huge trees there. And so we would go with like probably 20 neighborhood kids, and every single night of the summer it was game on. And so we would play this, I don't even remember what it's called now, but we played this game of group hide and seek. And so my goal was always I want to be the last to be found. And so like I climbed up this pine tree one time, and I made sure I was always on my own, and so nobody could see where I was hiding. And so I climbed up this pine tree and I'm like watching everybody else get caught, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so in. I am gonna win this one. And then the branch broke.
Oh my gosh.
So I landed with my toe like this, and then the branch and me, and so my toe was broken. And so
at least that was all that was broken.
I was really in so much pain, so I hopped all the way home, and it was not fun. But I went back as soon as my toe was better.
Just like that. Any other broken bones or?
Nope.
Thankfully, just the toes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then as a kid, I mean, did you feel like you ever wanted to just like leave Colorado or leave Boulder and like go to the big city? And like, what were your aspirations as a kid? Like, what did you ever dream about doing? Or
I think when I was a kid, like when I was still in Boulder, I was still young enough that Boulder was big enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like I wanted to go to my friend's house to ride horses, and so I did that whenever I could, and swimming like every day of the summer where it wasn't raining.
Yeah.
I was in the pool. We lived about 3 blocks away from a public pool. There was that, and then my dad's job. He was a firefighter, and he was on the scuba rescue team. And so he would do all this training. And so I would go really early in the morning before the pool was open. We would go to the pool, and I would watch him like swim, and I was just totally into that. And so he could do all these amazing feats. He was really my first hero in a lot of ways. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, every dad wants to hear that, right?
Yeah.
That they are the hero.
Yeah. I put that in the dedication to my first
Oh,
book.
really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So then high school, you were like one of many kids.
Well, see, we had moved to Longmont when I was 13. So I kind of got that fresh start because nobody knew who the Cordells were. So it was kind of nice in that way. But I was really, really shy. I was painfully shy.
Really?
And so in junior high...
Why do you think you were shy?
I don't really know.
Because, I mean, you sound like you were outgoing, too. Like, in the family, you were outgoing. Yeah. You were, that. But then, like, in public, you were shy or whatever.
I'm just like two people.
Yeah.
Split personality. So, but in middle school, and I think everybody's kind of awkward in middle school, right?
You can't escape it.
Yeah, so I was just really shy and quiet, and I was in a new environment too, and I know that made a difference because that was 7th grade, and back then it was junior high, so that was your first year of that middle schooling, and so I just was I was kind of quiet. It took me a while to make friends when we moved, and I was and then there was along with a lot of the great things about my dad, he was also very temperamental and could be abusive. And so there was a lot of family issues. And by the time I was a teenager, I was really bitter and resentful about all of that and just really shut down. And so while I was very adventurous in my own world, I didn't have like a family support. And so I was kind of a train wreck waiting to happen during those years. And fortunately, nothing really horrible did happen.
No train went off the tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then high school, were you kind of nerdy then and like quiet girl?
No, I was probably...
It was like pre-goth girl.
I was never would have been goth. I was always really pretty positive.
Okay.
and funny. Like if you look back, I was just looking at my yearbook the other day for kicks, and basically it was all just really funny stuff that people wrote in there. Stay crazy and,
Right.
party on. And I was a huge partier in high school, like out of
Really?
control. And sorry, Mom, you didn't know that.
Now she does.
Guess what? High school was kind of, I did well in school, but not stellar because I think I didn't really like the confinement of school.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't like a particular teacher, I was kind of meh.
I don't like you, so I'm not going to do good in this class or try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which wasn't very often. There was only one teacher that was really the bane of my existence, but
What was her name?
it was a guy.
Oh,
Yeah, Mr. Bergdorf.
Bergdorf.
He taught geometry, which I never understood, ever. I got straight A's in algebra, and geometry was like Russian. I was like, what? And I never got it. I still, to this day, do not understand geometry, and hopefully I'll never need it to save my
And
life.
Mr. Bergdorf was there just...
Mr. Bergdorf was horrid. He,
Sounds
if you didn't do well, he didn't help you to do better. He was a total...
Yeah.
bleep. And
Jerk.
yeah, that. And
Poor teacher.
and he would make fun of you.
Oh, yeah, the
And so-
humiliation.
Yeah. Even my dog Fifi knows that.
Right.
He said that.
Jerk.
And so after
Public
a while, I was just like,
humiliation.
I just would sit in the back of the room and just kind of glare at him, and then I'd go home and stare at my book and never understand anything.
Yeah.
So it was the only D's I ever got. I got
Really?
a C first quarter, and then I got 3 D's. So I don't know.
Yeah, I had a teacher like that in high school who just wasn't a good teacher. And, I always wonder, like, why are you doing this? Like, you don't get paid that well. Like, you obviously don't like me. Like, why are you here?
Right.
I have to be here.
Right.
And this is horrible, and I feel really bad that I did this. But my final test, I knew I was going to fail. And, essentially when you got done with your test, you could leave the class. And so I just wrote, I don't understand, Mrs. So-and-so is a terrible teacher. Have a great summer. And I turned my test in and walked out.
What grade did you get?
I got an F.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she, because that wasn't like the end of school. Like I still had like another week of school left, Yeah. And so, she called me in class and sat me down and was like, why did you write this? Maybe I made an impact in her life, and she turned around and became a better teacher after that.
Maybe. We hope we can
So
hope so.
she actually allowed me to retake the test, and I think I got like a D. So,
That's funny.
but yeah, I've had teachers like that before.
Yeah.
Did that hinder you from going to college? Or did you go to college?
No, it didn't hinder me because I didn't want to go to college.
Yeah.
I hindered myself from going to college. So I was just in my mind, it was okay. 4 more years of this, no, not really. And so I just didn't. But I didn't really know much about college. There really wasn't a focus on that in our family. I think there were only 3 of us that went to college directly out of high school. 2 of my older sisters and my younger sister. And I think my younger sister probably mainly went because she had the support of our older sisters. And but for me, I wanted to be a cosmetologist, and so there was Votech. They didn't call it Votech in Longmont, but wherever.
Like a vocational school?
Yeah, vocational school. And so I went to Longmont Beauty College.
Nice.
So that was probably the beginning of getting lots of writing fodder.
Yeah. So when you were younger, I mean, were you really good at writing, or that wasn't even on your radar?
Wasn't even on my radar.
Someday I want to be a writer.
No, because in school, whenever you had to write, they told you what to write.
Oh, right.
And given my propensity for
Right.
don't tell me what to do,
Yeah.
I just didn't like that formulaic stuff, and still don't actually like formulaic stuff. But I didn't get into writing. I was probably good at it. I mean, I was always really good with grammar and English. That came very easily to me. But I always loved storytelling, like actual verbal storytelling.
Yeah.
So, and I have a lot of really good stories to tell, and funny stories, even just from life. And so, I don't know, it just, but in high school, no.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about writing.
So then you go to cosmetology school, and you're thinking, I want to do hair and makeup for a living.
Right. Yeah, one of my sisters was a cosmetologist, and I think that was kind of my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked at a salon where I had a lot of advanced training in basically hair design. It wasn't just, okay, a chop shop deal. And so I worked under this guy named Rolf from Germany, and he was like, he could be in a movie. He's such a character. He would get mad at me because I had this bad habit of dropping my comb, and you can't use it again. You have to get a clean one.
Right.
And stick it in the Barbasol and all of that. And so he would just get all over my case, and then I would, of course, drop it more. And
on purpose?
So, no.
Oh.
No, I was just
But
nervous.
the pressure is like, oh, he's watching.
Yeah, and I was really good at hair design and, you know, at cutting and all of that. But I had in my adventurous life, when I was a senior in high school, I had fallen off a horse really, really at a high rate of speed and hit a bathtub that was used as a water trough. So my back was kind of
That sounds so random.
I know.
I fell off a horse and hit a bathtub.
Like the horse was going straight, and I'm like, we're heading for the trough. Great. And I could not get this horse under control. And so the horse had plenty of control. He turned on a dime and made a hard left, and I went straight. I flew off the horse's back, and then I hit my head, and I hit my arm on the trough, and I was looking up at the sky going, I'm not sure if I should move because my neck is very likely broken, or, you know, something's detached. Like it was bad. And so I called, I told my friends, like, I should not move. And my dad was a paramedic, so, or an EMT, you know, I knew these things.
Yeah.
And my mom, like, they talked a lot about, we just knew a lot about first aid and emergency medical situations and stuff
it's
like that.
Doug got his head severed today, and we had to take him into the shop and fix him up.
Exactly. I always wanted to reattach a severed. No, So anyway, I had my friends. I said, go call my mom and tell her that I need to go to the ER. Well, my parents didn't have much money, and so my dad was at work, so he had the car. So my mom had to ride the moped to get the car from my dad's work and then come and get me. But she
Were you crying or anything?
No,
or
I
do you just
wasn't
remember
crying.
just kind of being in shock and then
I was
thinking...
just scared of what I had done to myself.
It's like, I don't want to look.
I'm like, okay, my toes are moving. Okay, I can feel my knees. Like, I was just like freaking out about a spinal cord injury. And
you were with friends though?
Yeah.
So it was like, go get help.
Yeah, so then here's
Timmy
my
fell in the
mom's
well.
response. Because when I had left, my mom goes, "Don't fall off." And she was a real quiet comedian, but she's pretty quiet, but she's hilarious.
Yeah.
And so it was a joke. And I was like, "Oh, I'll call you if I do." And so she thought I was joking because I joked all the time.
Right. It's like the boy who cried wolf. Yeah,
the girl
right.
who cried wolf.
Yeah.
50,000 times. Yeah. So she didn't believe my friends. And she was not going to go down and get the car until she talked to me. So I was like, they come back out, and I'm like, surely my mom's going to be here any minute. Nope. They're like, she doesn't believe us, and she wants to talk to you.
You're like, I kind of can't move now. My neck's broken.
I know. So I'm like, I was so afraid to get up, but I had to go in and talk on the phone if I was going to get to the doctor's office. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of...
So then you picked yourself up and went, and then so I mean, what happened? I mean, were you
my neck
concussion?
was fine. No, I didn't. Well, back then,
Right? They didn't really. They're like concussion.
You're walking. You're good.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure they did the little pen light in my eyes and told me not to sleep through the night or something. But yeah, I had a major headache, and I had this huge egg right here. But my bone wasn't broken.
Oh, wow,
But I just had this ginormous
bruise,
whatever it was right there.
Yeah.
And so it was just suck it up and move on and
and you know, you're ninth, right? So at that point, it's like, I mean, already on my third, and I'm like, meh,
right.
Yeah, pick it up off the ground and eat it. It's not a big deal. So number 9, it's like, yeah,
right.
If we lose one, not a big deal. We got 9 more. Oh wow, okay. Yeah. All right, so then you went to cosmetology school and just started living your life, you know, building a career.
Cosmetology was concurrent with high school. So like my senior year, I was gone and from school for half the day, and then I would go back and basically I took PE classes in the afternoon because they were fun and that's all I needed. And so like I was playing volleyball and, you know, all of that. Since I wasn't headed to college, I was kind of just doing whatever I had to do to graduate. And so, yeah, cosmetology school was full-time the summer before senior year and then the summer after. And then I was free and I moved out.
Yeah, just like that.
Yep, got a job.
Doing hair?
Yeah, I was working for Rolf, the
Oh.
Terminator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was an apprentice.
Okay.
You had to apprentice. So it was 6 months of an apprenticeship, which basically meant I had to do whatever he told me to do.
Right.
And he kind of envisioned that he was a sort of a rock star.
He was a
stylist.
Tony-and guy before Tony-and guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had these women that thought he was that as well. So they would like wait. He had more than one salon. So we'd be in Longmont, or no, we'd be in Boulder. And then there was another salon in Longmont. He'd have appointments at both places. And his clients would wait for 4 hours.
Really?
And they would get really mad at the rest of us. Yeah, it was crazy. But once my paycheck started bouncing, then I decided to move on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That stinks.
Yeah.
So then what'd you do after that?
Well, then I got a job at a bank.
Classic.
Well, yeah. It was like, it took me a long time to find a job, and I got a job as a bank teller, and then I got fired.
You got fired?
I did. I got
Your
fired.
drawer was constantly off.
No, I was good at it except for
The geometry piece.
Yeah. No, I sold traveler's checks, a lot of traveler's checks, thousands and thousands of dollars, and I didn't get the money for them. So like these people went out, and it was a little tiny bank, so we knew all of our customers,
Right,
and they
right.
came back and paid, but my manager
It was like the
was
straw
like,
that broke the camel's back.
yeah, you're not really cut out
Yeah.
for this. So
These guys from Mexico came in, and I just gave them a bunch of traveler's checks. Oh, that's funny.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then you get fired from your bank job. Now, are you married at this point, or do you have kids, or are you thinking about getting married, or?
No, I was in a relationship with my now husband, and so he
Okay.
had gone to California to get his residency, to get his master's out there
Oh, wow,
in
okay.
music. And so the economy just was horrible in Boulder at that time, and I couldn't find another job, and I knew I didn't want to work at a bank. And so I went out to Escondido, which was where he was, and then worked out there until he had his residency, and then we were married that next May, and then we moved to Northern California for him to go to school.
Okay.
So we were in the Bay Area for several years while he was in school, and then we started we didn't start our business up there, but yeah, then he did sales for a little while after that.
Of course, you get your
And that's
master's, and then
where-
it's like, let's
yeah,
do sales.
Yeah. Well, we're both entrepreneurs, and so it was really only a matter of time before we started our own gig.
Yeah.
But it was just, I don't think we really knew what that was going to be until after working for someone else and realizing, yeah, we don't want to do this.
Right. Yeah. So then, what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor then?
Well, after I had our oldest, our first, we moved to San Diego and started a media company where we were doing. I'm dating myself here because it was multimedia. So it
Okay.
was like before you could do slides and things like that on computer.
Yeah.
You had this Marin Carroll camera that was like the size of that huge cabinet over there.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we created slides for, mostly our clients were defense companies.
Okay.
And then after the Cold War ended,
Yeah.
well, their budgets just
It went away.
got all really tiny. And plus there was also, they were starting to be able to do it in-house.
Right. Technology was
Yeah.
advancing and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
So then we had to reinvent ourselves again. And I didn't really work a lot. I helped with like the books and admin tasks and things like that. And then we had our other, our kids were pretty close together, 15 months apart,
Oh,
the
wow.
first two. And but when we were there, right after we had started this business in San Diego, our daughter, we found out that she had cancer.
Mm.
And so she was 15 months old, and I was like due right that week with Heather, our second.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a crazy time.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you even find out a 15-month-old has cancer?
Well, yeah, she had an eye tumor, and so when you have a small child, you're always
Yeah.
really close.
And your first
physically.
one, so you're like
Right.
always
Right.
paranoid.
And it was just when I would be spoon feeding her, I would I felt like one of her eyes wasn't tracking properly. And that was strange. And then we got some photos back, way back when you did real print photos. And that eye didn't have that red reflex, that red, when with the flash. And it was sort of like when you see an animal in your headlights and it's white. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. So I called a pediatric ophthalmologist. We were in between Escondido and San Diego, and I called Escondido, and they did not know about this cancer at that office. So, because a lot of times I learned later that was a lot of times how parents discovered it, was from a camera flash making the photo look weird. And so it was just very serendipitous. But I asked the doctor about it at her 12-month appointment, and he was like, oh, she's fine. Nothing wrong. And so anyway, 3 months later, when she has what I think is bronchitis, and I take her to the doctor for that, another doc is on that day, and he's not even all the way in the office, and he says, your daughter's only looking at me with one eye. And I know you're not here for that, but like, that's weird. And I was like, what? I was really upset because the doctor who I had brought it up to told me that I was an over-worried mom, which really made me mad.
Yeah.
And so anyway, come to find out, oh great, she's had something wrong with her eye. And at that time, in that moment, we thought it was a cataract, which wasn't really very frightening to me because I knew that cataracts were easily dealt with and it was unusual. But then they recommended that we go to a pediatric ophthalmologist. So we went down to a pediatric ophthalmologist, and he said, she has no vision in this eye. She's not seeing at all.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? And then he said it looks like it's probably retinoblastoma, and he had fellowed with a guy at Children's in LA and sent us up there because they could do all of the potential treatments under one roof. So within 3 days, we went from
you're an over-worried mom,
right, to wow, our daughter's eye is gone, and they took it out, and we came home day before Thanksgiving, and we're just like in shock because
they had to remove her eye.
Yeah.
So then then you're about to have another baby. It must have been a very traumatizing, stressful period.
It was, yeah. And then our insurance company went bankrupt. It was just a really great time.
It's like, add insult to injury.
Right.
I can't even get my medical bills paid.
Right.
Yeah, so then, what did you have to do at that point?
Well, we just had to pay everybody. So it was just a long process.
Wow.
And that was what precipitated our move back to Colorado, in part because the defense industry affecting our business, and then the all of these medical bills that just were not going to be paid. So we moved back where the cost of living was a lot lower, and we had family support and got some help from family. How
did you feel? So your daughter had to have her eye removed. Then did she get like a glass eye or something like that? Or
they're not glass anymore.
Okay.
But they and now I'm sure it's changed because she's 30 now. But what they did was they would fill the socket with a silicone ball, and they tie the ocular muscles together, and then they create
so that it can move
a
and
false eye that is shaped kind of like this, actually. And so, they painted, and it looked really good compared to the older, version.
Yeah. So, but I mean, thankfully, they could easily just remove her eye, and she didn't have to go through chemo, or it wasn't as life threatening then as leukemia or
In her case, now there were plenty of retinoblastoma patients that do have to have all those treatments.
Yeah.
It really depends on how far the disease has progressed. So it was a really tense, probably about 10 days before we got the pathology report back, determining that it hadn't passed, because they said, well, it can go along the ocular nerve and go into the brain. And so it was like...
Yeah, then
so
you have
that
brain
was while
cancer.
I delivered Heather, and all of that was during that same 10 days, and it was just crazy.
Yeah.
But it had not spread, and so it was fully contained in the eye. So fortunately, in that regard, she's had to go through her life with just one eye, which is definitely challenging for her.
Depth perception.
Depth perception, and just knocking into things when you're, and as a toddler, that was scary because, you're always like, okay, well, there's only one eye there now, so we need to make sure nothing happens to it. And so she wore some little glasses that were just for protection.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just so she wouldn't poke her other eye.
Right.
And stuff like
Yeah, you're
that.
like extra paranoid now.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm really laid back, and I guess I just I didn't want my daughter to grow up feeling like she was less than or not whole or incapable of doing what she wanted to do. And I realized you can't do everything that you want to do if you have a physical limitation. But I didn't want to put that victimhood mindset on her. Neil and I both, we just didn't do that with her.
Yeah.
And so we kept her safe within what we felt like, okay, this is what we have to do. But we really wanted her to be adventurous and to, we've tried to foster still that confidence in her physical abilities. And she actually, she did a lot of things that probably other parents wouldn't have let her do because of that fear that you can get really stuck in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys moved back to Colorado, and what do you decide to do at that point?
Well, then my husband did some business consulting, and I had 3 little kids at the time, so I was only working like part-time doing, my usual admin stuff.
And the full-time mom gig, that's hard.
Right. And so he started a real estate brokerage.
Okay.
And he still does that.
Nice.
Yeah, so I helped out with that and, learned a lot.
Nice. So when did you get your first inkling to write a book? And what made you feel that you could even do that?
Well, actually, when I didn't actually have the idea to write a book. I had this, I have kind of crazy, I have a really imaginative mind. I always have. And
is one of these your first book?
Yeah, Pray for Me is
Okay.
my first book. And so I woke up one morning and had just had this really vivid dream. And this was about probably 12 years ago. And I was just like, wow, I just felt compelled to write it down. And I dream all the time, and I had never felt that, compulsion to do that. So I was like, well, I just wrote it in my journal, and I didn't really tell anybody about it. And at the time, my husband was starting to commute out of state for work. And so I was like, we are really tight. We are best friends. And so I was trying to think, okay, all my kids were in school now. What am I going to do? How am I going to cope with him being gone so much? I wanted to do something positive and something engaging and challenge myself. And so I was talking with one of my daughters about that dream, and she goes, "Oh, Mom, you should write it out." She was really into J.K. Rowling at the time, and so she's like, well, she had read some article.
Have you heard of Harry Potter?
What her process was, and she goes, "You should outline it," because that's what she did first. So I said, "Really?" And it was just so funny. So this this story just kind of became like a person in my head. And no, I didn't need therapy. Well, maybe I did, but not for that.
Maybe, but yeah.
And
the other
so
voice?
I just so I'm like, all right, so I wrote it down, and I felt like I really had a story there. And then I realized I don't know what I'm doing, and so I better learn how to do it. And so I took, there was a class.
How long ago was this?
This was about 10 or 12 years ago.
Okay, so Googling wasn't a thing really yet.
No.
You couldn't just be like, how to write a book.
No. No, Google wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
And so I basically just took classes, and I devoured every book at the public library on fiction. And, well, the ones that were good, and then the ones that I thought were stupid, I just turned them back in, right? I didn't expect. And the ones I really liked, I bought a copy on Amazon and just devoured it and took notes and typed out my notes. That's just kind of how I learn and remember things. And so and then joined, writing groups and just kind of a little bit of a collaborative process on certain aspects of it, not so much on the story as the process. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Because what I was writing also required a lot of research.
Right.
I'm kind of a research geek.
But that's good, right?
Yeah.
Because if writing
It helps
requires
me.
research, then
Right.
you can just sit there and research. And you like it. What's this book about? The Pray for Me, Prey.
So it is about a young college student, and she has a stalker. And she doesn't discover how extreme it just kind of slowly gets turned up. But
Sounds like
when
a horrifying
when
dream.
you enter the story, you have no idea.
I woke up in a cold sweat and
I was
started
shaking.
writing.
No, funny. The funny thing is, the book really changed from my original iteration to the final final iteration.
As it evolved, it kind of.
Yeah, book evolution.
Well, I'm sure it's kind of nice too, because you can kind of go back and say, "Oh, let me change this," or once you kind of have it all there, you can start to really, with the end in mind, or if you have an end, you can change things in the beginning, right? It kind of can be more fluid like that.
Right. Yeah, that's one fun thing about fiction that doesn't get to happen in real life.
Yeah.
Hey, edit. I'm just going to
That's
edit
right.
what I just said. How about that?
Yeah. The hindsight
Pretend
2020.
I didn't say that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, the first scene is she wakes up at 2 a.m. and this guy's in her apartment. So it starts off just at a run.
Yeah.
And it kind of
intense.
stays that way throughout the book.
Yeah.
And I always have to be careful here because I'm really detail oriented.
Yeah.
And I can't give anything important
Yeah. We don't
away.
want to
So she leaves where, she's at Boise State.
Okay.
So she leaves and then kind of reinvents herself. And do you think he finds her?
Well, I can only imagine the suspense thriller.
So yeah, he finds her.
So it's just kind of like that journey, and
Right. It's a
sounds
chase.
sounds
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Are they gonna make a movie out of it, or what?
Well, I haven't
someone
had
comes
any
knocking?
contracts emailed to me yet, but there's always hope.
Yeah. Right. If there's any producers watching or anybody. So then, as far as getting a book published, or like what when you started writing your book, did you have like that in mind of, man, I want this to be a like bestseller, or was it just like a personal project? Like, I want to write this book just so I can say I did it, or what did that look like for you?
Well,
Did you have an end in mind, or was it just more of a hobby?
no, I definitely, want every author really wants to have a bestseller, and
Yeah.
Getting there is a path that is different for everyone. And really, since I decided to go indie as opposed to pursue the big houses, because the industry has changed as much as technology has changed.
Yeah.
The publishing industry has changed. And so literally every 6 months, you've got to find out, well, what's going on now? And both on the indie side, not so much on the indie side, but definitely on the major houses. I mean, now there's like three. There's 3 houses when there
Right.
used to just be loads and loads of them. And they've all eaten each other up.
Right.
And so I did at one point have a contract. I was offered a contract for A Man Around the House. And it was just, I was like, well, let's see. I've been a business person for a really long time, and I understand profit and loss.
Yeah. This is not a beneficial deal.
It was, exactly. So I was like, have a nice day.
Well, and now with technology, right? I mean, you can sell your own book on Amazon
Right.
and other places like that. And
Right.
once you build a following on social media or like a fan base, when you release a book, you have a higher chance of, books being sold. We had an author on several months ago, and it was interesting because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, like, selling millions and millions of copies is like easy to do. But he was like, you could have a bestseller just with like, several thousand copies being sold,
Right.
because it's just, I guess nowadays too, it's like with the internet and so many things, it's like, you don't really have that, I don't know, like the publishing houses and stuff maybe don't have that big of an audience, or, I mean, what does that look like?
Well, they're all different, and it very much depends on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Hillary Clinton, you get that $6 million, deal.
Signing bonus or
and
whatever, yeah.
You don't have to sell any books. I mean,
Right.
so it really just depends on who you are very much, but it also depends on luck. And when we were in California, we lived in the Hollywood area and had a lot of friends in the business, as they call it out there, and it's very much like that, where I had a friend that was working as a waitress and got an acting gig from that. I had another one that was working that was a gymnast in college, and she got a gig. And she started working in Steven Spielberg's like office, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's just so random. And that's very much how it always is. And I think that's how life is to a very large degree.
Yeah.
So I'm not really caught up on fame or anything like that. I definitely want to make money at it.
Yeah.
But I also have certain goals of publishing a certain number of books, because you really, especially as an indie author, you need to have a lot of books out before you can really get any sales momentum. And so I haven't, to be honest, focused that much on marketing my books, because there's not that much to sell. I mean, people read a book in a couple of days and then they want the next one.
Right.
And so my goal is to have 7 by about a year and a half from now.
Really?
And then I'll
And how many books do you have right now?
I'm almost done with my 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
So
yeah,
now,
it's an ambitious goal.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you start thinking about writing a book now, so the first one came from a dream, like that's kind of where it was
And
birthed.
that was just like the seed of it.
Yeah, the seed of it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, you started doing research, you started like thinking like, maybe I could be a writer. I mean, and then once you finish that book, I mean, then what?
Well, that was actually, finishing the first one is just huge. It was like, I don't know what to compare it to. Maybe running a marathon that you've trained for a long time, because I didn't really know if I could do it or not until I really did it. And that's kind of how I am. I'm someone that's like, I'm going to try that.
Right.
And then if I do it, I'm like, oh, that worked out pretty good. So let me do that again. So the first book, there was a lot of, I did a lot of classes, and there was so much learning. And then I was part of a critique group. So I got a lot of feedback on it, which was there's 2 edges to that sword.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of really helpful feedback, and you get a lot of like, really, you just said that?
Right.
And
it's just, like, I'm a human being with feelings.
Or just stupid stuff. Like I had one person say, I hate that word. Okay.
Thanks.
Well,
thanks for the critique.
I hope you get over it. I hope you're going to be okay. And I left it in there. And because there was nothing wrong with it. It was just like,
the word moist.
I hate that word. And so just stupid stuff like that.
Right.
But by the same token, that same person gave me so much helpful input in my process and in my in the storyline. You know, like this works and that doesn't work, and this is a little too slow here. Just your pacing, characterization, all kinds of things.
Huh. Well, I'm sure, too, the difficult thing is there is definitely a science to it, right? There's a formula and all these things.
To a
but
degree.
Yeah, but then there's also an art to it, right?
Exactly.
Which is preference and opinion and all these things, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure when you make yourself vulnerable to somebody and show them your work, and then they start picking it apart or they don't like certain things, it's kind of like, well, who are you?
Well, we talked about it. We're like, okay, we've developed our critique armor. We call it armor, that this isn't personal. And so I can do that in my own head. I can say, this isn't personal, and move on. And it took me a while to develop that, because I'm actually a really sensitive person. And I went to this big mistake, never did it again, open critique, which is with people that you've never met.
It's like, get in your underwear and stand in front of everybody.
Right.
And let them
And I
critique
got sliced and diced by
Yeah.
this really major jerk guy. And I was like, and I actually cried. And I was so embarrassed that I cried. And I was like,
You cried in front of everybody?
I did. I
I'm
totally
sorry.
did. I'm an easy crier. It's
Me
terrible.
too. Me too.
My kids are always like, Mom, really? I'm like,
It's like, when the
It's just
Olympic
me.
season comes on, they show these like, Procter and Gamble commercials. It's like moms. It's like,
I know. Hallmark card commercials.
Right.
Yeah. Give me the dishes. Yeah. So, but I definitely did
Yeah.
get tougher.
So then you finish the book, you get all these critiques. I mean, and then do you have to like pay someone to like edit it, or how does that work as far as
Well, if
that
you want it to
process
be
goes?
edited properly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did pay, hire an editor, and then I hired a cover designer, and so, but yeah, my second book took me, including the plotting, like from day one of the idea, 4 months.
4 months. Wow.
Right. And then my third book took me 6 weeks.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. So once you wrote that first book, then it was kind of like, 1, you like this, and 2, I want to do this again.
Right, and it's getting the process, because there are so many. I'm a big picture person, and I like to know where I'm going. I'm not. There's a thing in writing where they say, "Are you a plotter or a pantser? Like, do you write by the seat of your pants, or do you like to plot?" And I am a plotter. I think pantsers waste a lot of time, because then you got to go back and fix all this stuff because it doesn't match up or whatever. And I just, in my genre, I don't know how one could do that, but maybe I just don't have the right kind of brain for it. I need a software update, but once I got the process down, and I liked my own story, like, hey, I'm a fan of me, like, this works.
I'm my biggest fan.
And so that doesn't help you make money, but at least it boosts your confidence.
Right.
So from there, it was just like, yeah, I can actually do this, because you can choose who you listen to, but even when you're not really tuning into person number A, that either one, in my case, I didn't respect, or two, they just weren't connecting, like they read sci-fi and this wasn't, so there weren't really the right person to give me input. Beyond that, it was like, hey, yeah, I can totally do this. And so it was a really good feeling, for sure.
And then tell me a little bit about the process of self-publishing and being an independent artist. What does that look like, and how do you you finished your book, and then what did you do at that point? You had a stack of paper and you're like, okay.
Well, it wasn't paper anymore, because I actually,
you weren't typing on a typewriter furiously. End.
Right.
And stacked it up.
No, when I first started writing, though, actually, I couldn't write on a computer. Like, I couldn't create when I was doing on a keyboard, and I certainly had a computer, and Google was probably a baby. I don't know, but it was just that. So I evolved to where, it's a real pain in the neck to physically write something, especially 110,000 words, and then you go back and edit. I was like, I've got to figure this out. So really, it was just kind of a process of, all right, learning how to become creative within the technology framework. And from there, looking at the manuscript, there's a program that I use that is specific for writing that I love. It's called Scrivener. And
Scrivener? Okay.
Yeah, and it's much more robust if you have a Mac, because it was developed for Mac.
Okay.
But it's wonderful for self-publishing and for all kinds of other writing projects as well. Even if
I think I've heard it for film writing too and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes, they have a lot of templates there for different things, and so that's part of it. But I also took a lot of classes on the publishing side, and was a part of different professional groups and online groups, and so just kind of learning the ropes that way. And once again, it is something that is evolving, and so I redid my website I got it done in January, and so the website that I have now is specifically for authors.
Okay.
And it's a WordPress theme that is specifically for authors. It's called Author Cats, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I am an affiliate, so if anybody wants to look on my website, I can connect with you and tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the indie process, I think, for me, it's very freeing and it's good. And but from there, you have to decide where you want your book and what is your goal. Because like you said, it might just be to write the book, or it might be something for your family. So really, you have to figure out if you want to go indie, if that can help you achieve your goals, or if it's better to pursue that publishing deal. I did pursue publishing deals initially, and then after I kind of got schooled and different interactions and things like that, I decided that really wasn't the best fit for me. But I'm not down on it. It just was not.
The right deal hasn't come your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you sold your first book, online to a stranger, did you feel awesome?
Yeah, that's a great feeling to know that somebody, and especially seeing the reviews, seeing somebody that likes my.
Is it sold
stories.
on Amazon? Or? Okay.
Yeah, they're all on Amazon and
Amazon.
Kindle and a whole bunch of other places. And
so someone 5 stars. I really loved how, and
right.
You're like, yes.
Right. Yeah, and there's, I don't take it personally if someone doesn't like my work,
right.
Because it's really when I go to an art gallery, there's probably only a few pieces I really like. That doesn't mean I don't like the artist.
Right.
It just means that, everybody has a different
Yeah, you
taste.
can connect with it.
So my style is, I like a good rocking story and a lot of humor where it fits. And, I'm not into the whole raunchy sex scene stuff.
Yeah,
That's just not my...
50 Shades is super popular.
Right. Yeah. So we've got a few less shades there in my book.
A lot of less shades.
Yeah. We just kind of take off the shades. So it's just not my thing. And and then, the romance, I like the relationships, but it's not really sappy. And so.
Yeah. So then do you have routines that you have set up? I mean, do you find with your goal, right? You've set this goal of wanting 7 books, in the next, by this year and a half, right? Mm-hmm. From now, you'll have the rest of your books written. So you're finishing book number 4. Mm-hmm. So do you find that you have to put yourself on a regiment? Do you say, okay, I'm going to write in the morning, or do you just write when you're inspired? How does that work for you?
Well, I don't just write when I'm inspired, because that's just not how it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have a pretty, I'm not crazy disciplined about it in the sense that I have a daily word goal or an hourly word goal. Some writers really go crazy with statistics. And for me, that's actually
like if I write 100 words a day for this many days, then I'll have a book.
But when I'm in it, for me, it's really more about, okay, if I have my story prepared and I'm in it, like my head is in it, then I can just roll and I can get 5,000 words in a day, and it doesn't feel like I worked very hard to do that. There are other times when it's not like that, where you're like slogging. Oh, I got 300 more words done. Mm-hmm. Great. So it just all, it just all depends. But if you don't write, you won't finish.
Right.
And so I have been on somewhat of an unplanned hiatus because of an injury that happened last year. And then, so I was not able to, I was in too much pain to do anything like that, especially that creative work. So I actually took classes online during that time, like internet marketing and some other stuff, web development, just basic stuff.
Yeah, kind of educate yourself, teach yourself new skills.
Right, and then my husband and I, we raise bison, and so we...
to eat or to look at?
Well, you look at them and then you eat them.
Okay, nice. Bison burgers.
Yeah.
I hear bison's pretty tasty.
It is.
I've just never had a bison that I liked.
Yeah.
Maybe just been cooked wrong.
You just never know.
Yeah.
It depends on where you've eaten it.
Where do you raise bison?
Well, currently they're up at a ranch in the mountains. We have a ranch in the family that my sister and brother-in-law own, so we've had them up there since we've owned them. Okay. Almost since we've owned them. And
how many bison?
I'm really bad with the numbers.
More than 5?
Yeah. No, it's in the 20s somewhere.
Okay.
So
I heard that bison were going extinct for a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's been a resurgence of bison.
Well, I mean, the time when they almost went extinct was in the early 1900s.
Right.
And the reason why they didn't was because of private owners. Oh. So, yeah, it's a really interesting history. My husband would tell it a whole lot better than me because he's a total history geek.
Right.
But basically, the private owners, and then between that and Yellowstone National Park, that's what revived the bison herd, the bison numbers in our country. And so it was, because it was down to, I believe, well, gosh, see, this is where I'm going to slaughter it, no pun intended, probably less than 1,000 in the whole U.S.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So.
And I'm sure that now 1,000 get eaten every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you, wow. So now you're raising bison as a part-time deal on the side. Do you go up and feed them or like?
Well, most of the time they don't need to be fed because we have enough pasture for them, and there's a creek that runs through there. This year, because of how dry it's been, we have needed to feed, and it was getting a little scary with the drought. Their water almost totally dried up. Really? For the first time ever in 22 years. So that's crazy. We've had the bison.
Why did you get into bison?
Well,
This is off topic, but this is very interesting.
it's a rabbit. It's a rabbit.
It is a
trail.
rabbit
You
trail.
ready?
Yeah.
So our girls, we were living in Jefferson County, and
Okay.
our girls were in something called Western Airs. You may or may not have heard of it. It's a
It's like
drill
the
team on
4-H
horses.
club. Oh, okay.
And you can only be in it if you live in Jeffco. So they're like, we want horses. And we're like, well, we just have a backyard here. So you
Right.
guys do this for a year. And then if you're still serious about it, then we'll talk. So they did it for a year. And so we started looking for a horse property. And one of the properties that we went to was along I-25 frontage road up near Meade. And we looked out. We really liked the house. We liked the property. And the guy had bison. And we're like, well, that's interesting. And he was there. The owner was there, and he was a really nice guy. So we put an offer in on the property. And Neil was like, so those are pretty cool. He's a CU Buffs alum. Aren't you as well?
Me? No, I'm
No,
not.
you're not.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I have family
And,
who is.
So anyway, he's a CU Buffs alum. So he just was like, well, that'd be kind of cool. So we're like these suburbanites.
Yeah.
And we got bison, and we didn't end up buying that property, but we became good friends with the owner, and he was actually a major breeder, one of the biggest breeders here in the
Really?
state. And so he connected us with basically a mentor who our mentor is Chad, and he runs the bison herd now. He manages the herd at Custer State Park
Okay.
in South Dakota. So he basically was like, so this is how you build a fence, and this is when a bison, he taught us the ABCs, and we ended up, we were terrified of them when we first got them.
Yeah.
And now Neil's kind of a maniac. I'm like, okay, this isn't a good day to die, so
Yeah.
dial it back a notch. And so, because they're wild animals, and
Right. Yeah.
you
at
need
the end
to
of the
respect
day.
that.
Right. Yeah.
They can seem totally docile,
And then just
And then
stab you with a horn.
they're
and
not.
You're done.
and
yeah.
then you're
Yeah.
ready to be skewered, or you've been skewered.
You've been skewered, and then
Yeah.
the bison has
Yeah.
to get sold to Ted's.
Right. Yeah. But since we did have kids, all the kids, we decided we're not going to keep any of the crazies.
Mm-hmm.
Not the kids, but the buffalo.
Right.
And
Kept the kids.
so we would process the ones that were just like,
Right.
yeah, you want to kill me. So guess what?
Yeah.
It's not going to go down like that.
Right. Yeah. And then has that been a pretty lucrative business? It seems like there's been a resurgence of buffalo, as far as, I know at least the meat part of it, but then do you use the skins and other
We don't.
aspects of it? Okay.
We don't.
Yeah.
We have people ask us for skins all the time, and we're like, well, we're not tanners. So
Right.
and we because we sell meat direct to customers.
Okay.
And so we
You brought me books, but no bison.
hey, maybe you're a
Next time, mail me
vegetarian.
some.
So anyway, all of this I was coming around to say that part of my hiatus last year from writing was also that we decided to we have a farm down in Elbert County, and we are bringing our bison down there.
Oh, okay.
And so we're going to start doing events for our meat customers, so
Yeah.
anyway, it's going
That's
to be fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, all right. Bison, amazing. So cool. Where do you find inspiration for the next book? You talked a little bit about your process of, that you have to write. You don't always write when you're inspired. But, is it something where you're just at the grocery store and an idea pops in your head and you're like, ooh, that would actually be a good story?
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah.
It's really random, and sometimes it's a little crazy. I get ideas for characters. I'm very observant. I watch people. There's some of us writers have a T-shirt that says, "Be careful how you treat me, or you might end up in my next story."
That's good.
So, and my characters are not, oh, this person is that person in real life. That's not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do get ideas from people and just from interactions. And we've lived a lot of places, and we've known a lot of people that are very different from ourselves, from all different cultures and that sort of thing. So I have a lot to draw from experientially, but also, last night, we had to drive up to Cheyenne to get something up there, and this guy was walking away, and it was dark outside, and I was like, he just had a really interesting gait. And I whipped out my phone, and I just put this little note in Evernote. And I just described it, and so I sometimes just make little notes like that, and maybe I use them, maybe I don't. So it really is just a random process, but sometimes I get like a whole story. We were in Minnesota watching our daughter was a professional cyclist for the last 6 years.
Oh, wow.
She retired after last summer, but a couple of years ago we were in Minnesota at one of her races, and you have to like drive really far because there's like there's a race in this town and then there's a race in that town. So we're just in the back roads of Minnesota, and we drove by this farmhouse, and like, bam! I just had a whole story come in my head, and I was like, wow. And so my poor husband, he had to be quiet for a half an hour.
He's like,
I wrote it.
Yeah.
I kept this little book in it's like a mini journal. I kept it in my purse, and I was like, and I was writing until I was all done.
That's awesome. You said on your first book, did you write on like a pen and paper then? You didn't, because you said the computer was...
Only early on.
Okay.
And then I was like, there's no way. I'll never get this. It'll be 2059 by the time I'm done. So yeah. Then I had to transition
to typing, and
I had to stop being a troglodyte.
Because then you'd have to go and then retype it all back in, right, to save it and back it up, whatever it is.
And now it's great because I do a lot of audio stuff.
Oh, okay. Where you can just dictate it.
Yeah. And then you have to go back and edit that.
It's like,
what was that? That's nothing like what I would have said, and now I don't remember what I said. So there are pros and cons to that whole idea.
Yeah.
Siri is just sometimes not a good friend.
I know. Yeah, you gotta.
She betrays me.
Dragon Dictate, or isn't there some other softwares out there that?
Well, but I think Dragon
really
is dead now because of how that's just been developed for free.
Yeah, right.
So much for the Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm excited that you're going to continue to write. Do you have your fourth book that you're finishing up? What's that called? Do you have a name for it yet?
It's called Where There's Smoke.
Okay.
So and in this series, it's about a fire investigator.
Okay.
And my main character, Lacey, the one that with the stalker.
Yeah.
And so
then are all these books then tie into each other?
Not these three.
Okay.
They're all like the first in their own series. And so I'm like, okay, so if I called it a series, I guess I better get on it.
Right.
And so I have a lot of the series, several books. I think it's probably 4 or 5 planned out.
Okay.
For the Colorado Tempest. And that's really focuses with the fire investigator, arson investigator, and suspense, and kind of a mix of things.
Yeah. So do you have the rest of your books, like the ideas for them?
I have a lot.
Okay.
That's what I'll put them in Scrivener, and then they're like saved to Dropbox and iCloud. Because I have a friend who he's actually a very famous writer, and his house burned down a number of years ago. Before, it's been a while now, but he's also older, so he wasn't as up to date with
backing
a lot of
up
tech.
and saving.
And he lost a lot, and his only saving grace was that he had a thumb drive where he had a lot of his manuscripts because they had to get out, and they didn't have time to grab anything.
That's crazy.
So I was like, okay, I don't need to learn the hard way.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever find yourself like writing something and being excited and then it getting boring, and like you're like, you know what, I don't know if I want to spend the energy continuing this path, and you just throw it away?
Yeah.
Like, do you have a lot of like half ideas and partial stories?
It's like a mannequin that's missing its head, or missing its leg. Yeah.
Or do you ever complete something and then be like, this is crap? And
well, it's funny because I sort of have struggled with that with Where There's Smoke. I'll be like, this sucks. Why am I doing this? And then I took a break from it for a while, and I went back, and I'm like, okay, I need to read it again and see how I feel now. Yeah. I'm like, this is really good.
You're like, wow, whoever wrote this is awesome.
Was this just my hormones talking?
Right.
I don't know. My insecurity, who knows? Yeah. So I just figure, as long as once it's done, as long as I walk away from it, I don't look at it, I try not to think about it for at least a month, and then I go back and I read it again. And if I like it, then I go with it. And if I don't, I just give it a proper burial.
In flames. How do you know when it's done? I mean, because a book could go on forever, right? I mean, is there like a boundary that you say, okay, it can't be more than this many pages, so I have to figure out how to squeeze it all within that, gate? I mean, how does that work?
That is actually from a standpoint of publishing and norms, that's evolving as well. But for me, it really, honestly, endings are the hard part. I do much better if I know the ending right at the beginning. But with I think, which one? It's hard to keep track. Changing Sky. I wasn't totally sure, and so that was harder. But and it was too long, and I had to cut stuff out, and so that's why for me, I walk away, and I also have a couple of writing friends that
like,
will
hey,
give
critique,
it an
like,
honest
read this
read.
book, tell me what you think.
And now I don't do the chapter by chapter thing because I don't need it. But I do here's my manuscript, and then we kind of trade favors because it's a big ask.
Right. It's like, I got to read one of your
Can you spend the next 2 weeks of your life
reading
on
my
nothing
book
but
and
my
making
book?
notes? Yeah.
Yeah. So I sometimes, could bribe people with buffalo meat too, I guess.
It's like, do you want some burgers or steaks?
Come on, give me those notes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I lost train of thought. But
yeah. So sometimes you will just write, and then do you sense, okay, I feel like this story's coming to an end, and you can just put a cap on it?
Yeah, and then sometimes you just have to go with a couple of my books. I think endings are a weakness for me as a writer.
Yeah.
And they're obviously not as weak as they were because now I have, 3 done.
Right.
But everybody sort of has a blind spot. And for me, I think, or weakness, and I think that for me, that's probably what I would say, because I'm got characterization, I'm good at that, dialogue, good at a whole lot of things. But so for me, usually what I do is it's too long, and then I go back and I'm like, I don't need this, and I take it out, and I just do some surgery, plastic surgery, make it look better.
It's like, a little tummy tuck. And
right. We need
what
a little nip.
what are some things that you would offer as advice to young writer or somebody who's coming up who's maybe interested in writing, and what are some things that you've learned over the past 12 years that you would say, hey, I recommend starting here, or get involved in this? Or
well, I would say that focus on craft, and then focus on story. And because you get this great idea and you think it's so great, and then you realize, oh, it's actually pretty crappy. There are just, it's like maybe you have the design for a car, but all you've got is just the body, and you don't have the motor, and you don't know if you're front wheel drive or rear wheel drive. It's kind of like that. At least that's been my experience. That so I think that if you work on your craft, which means write. You need to write. And you also need to read while you're writing. And don't only read what you like to read or what you're writing. If you're writing, like for me, I write romantic suspense. At least that's what I've written so far. I have plans to do some nonfiction as well. But you need to have a broader range. And so I do a lot of audiobooks because I don't have time to sit, and writing is so sedentary anyway.
Right.
I use a standing desk just so that I'm not always sitting.
Right.
And plus I like to be active, and it's like, oh, I gotta get out of the seat. So for that, and then also there are now there's just so many wonderful groups that you can be a part of. People talk a lot about writing conferences, and I am definitely on the unpopular list with most of my writing friends when it comes to conferences, because they're very expensive, and I cannot tell you how many times during we met twice a month religiously for 2.5 years in this writing group I was part of. Can't tell you how many times somebody said, well, at this conference, this editor said blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, that's really stupid. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So therefore what? It just was really, within the first 2 pages, you need to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Right.
Why?
Just because some guy at a conference said so?
And it's like, okay, so that's what that editor looks for. Great. Well, I guess I won't be pitching to that editor.
Right.
Because it's art. And it's like, if every painting was the same, you wouldn't find one that you liked, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about deciding, okay, what do I want my readers to experience, and how can I make that happen? And I'm super goal oriented. And the other thing that you can really do in any online pursuit is you can get sucked into the 50,000 things that are not going to get you where you're going, but you can really spend a lot of time and money on it. And there are so many sharks in this business. Oh, just pay me $1,000 up front. I had a friend who has an MBA, and he paid an editor up front to edit his manuscript, and gee, she didn't ever do it.
Right.
Well, and he was like, well, it was at a conference by some famous author who I don't recall at the moment.
Right.
And he felt like that was enough, capital or credibility. That person had enough credibility
Right.
because she was at a conference led by so-and-so, some really major author. And I was like, really? You did that? And now your money's gone. And she didn't ever get in the manuscript. And it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
you just have to, there's a website called Predators and Editors. It's a really great resource for if you are looking at that regular book deal, traditional deal, then that's a great site because you can check out people.
Oh, okay.
And now these editors know it now. So there's a little bit less of that, but
Yeah,
still
more accountability.
they just change their name and they pop up a new website.
Right.
And,
What about some good resources as far as, like, oh, this is a really great book, or this is a great podcast, or something that you have found valuable that you would share with somebody as well?
The funny thing about me is that I'm terrible at trivia. So, like, I can read these great books, and I'm not good at remembering the titles and the authors. So if anybody does want to know, they can definitely email me through my website, and I'm happy to share my books that I love. But I would say, just off the top of my head, How to Write a Damn Good Novel is a really good book.
Nice.
And then he did How to Write a Damn Good Novel 2. And those were my favorite books. They were just totally relevant stuff, not a bunch of fluff. And I loved that, and I can't even remember the author. He wrote Million Little Pieces or something. He was a super famous author, one on the Oprah Book Club and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I'm just terrible at remembering names like that. But I do remember the titles, and those were fabulous books. I still have my copies from way back.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey, and educating us on buffalo or bison. What's the correct?
It's either or.
Either or.
Yeah.
Where can people follow you? Where can they, find you online and communicate with you? And
trfischer.com, and Fisher has a C in it,
Okay.
so Fischer, and that's a good place to start. And because on my website I have my Facebook page link, and I've got my Twitter link, but don't look for me on Twitter because I'm hardly ever there.
I'm a writer who doesn't write online.
Gosh, I don't know, there's just something about Twitter that necessary evil.
Right.
So those are the main two. Main way to get to me.
Well, awesome. Well, once again, thank you for being on the show.
Oh,
and
thank you for having me.
I'll be excited to read one of these books and just follow you and see, how things continue to unfold and how your life continues to just be awesome.
Thank you.
So we'll see you guys when we see you, and hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time.